I mean, I guess the question would be, how studied and researched is it?
Years of study. In some ways, you could say thousands of years of study. This is where I get myself into a lot of trouble with archaeologists.
Historians have an oath to the truth, an oath that they have broken, and because of this, in the vacuum of answers that they have left behind, snake charmers and charlatans have sold fictional tales that the many had to accept. But when we look at the evidence, when we actually look at the evidence, then there is no need for fairy tales. That missing link that historians will not tell us is not a mystery at all. Let me tell you how it all began. Imagine you are the citizen of a great civilization in 9500 BC. The kingdom you live in is so big that it stretches from the most western point in northern Africa all the way to Ethiopia, on the far east of Africa. Your land is green and lush, and your crops help to feed the largest army the world has ever known. Your king is so powerful that he is named after the Atlas Mountain, and your capital city is so beautiful and so advanced that visitors call it Atlantis, beautiful land of the King Atlas. Suddenly, one night, a wave of seawater taller than a skyscraper ravages through the land. You barely escape with your life along with a few survivors. When the water retreats, there is nothing left, no trace of your once great empire. Everything has been pulverized by a gargantuan flood of seawater and mud. All your art, buildings, and historical records are now gone forever. This engraving is chiseled into the heart of the awakened ones, those who are said to be without history, birthed civilization itself. Because of all the salt and debris from the flood, the land is now barren, and very few things will grow. After a few years, you notice that the rain cycles have changed. Where life was easy and the ground generous, you now find it hard to make it from season to season. Even all the great animals are gone. One afternoon, you hear of a great commotion outside of the cave you have been hiding in. You come out and you find a long caravan marching in the distance. Happy to find signs of civilization, you rush down to them. As you get close, you notice that their clothes look like that of your people, but they are slightly different, and they speak the same language as you, but with a weird accent. And with them, you recognize people from different cities that were bordering your once great city. You ask them where they are going, and they point in one direction, east, towards the great river. They say that it is the last place that hasn't been destroyed by the waves, and that it is the only place where food still grows, but it is far. You rush to grab your things and join the caravan. A few days later, taking shade from the scorching sun, you muster enough courage to ask them what is that great river they speak of? They finally answer, the Nile.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I just hope that you're doing fine, wherever you are today. Now, those who are said to be without history, birthed civilization itself. From hearing this statement, I felt like a fool for sitting in the classroom being told that so-and-so discovered so-and-so, so-and-so discovered so-and-so. And I was like, damn, I didn't think, where were these black folks when all these people are trying to do this? And for the longest time, one thing that those liars have achieved in history is to lie to people, and especially black folks. Worst of it all, they've lied to Africans a lot, to the extent that anything to deal with invention, anything to do with something that brought something great or something new, Africans, we will think that it is a white person, right? And we grew in a society where we used to equate whiteness with greatness, because every time we had any invention, we thought that usually it was like everything was for a white person. But that was a lie, because I came to see the truth. And there are a couple of things that sometimes you need to sit down and think and look about. Like, for example, they have always said that black Americans didn't have no civilization. But in fact, when we talk about black civilization, we talk about the Moors. the most taught people how to bathe. Look at the life of the Vikings, the Europeans, the white people. Their culture, their life was so barbaric. Coming to watch those Viking movies and series made me learn something, made me see the type of lifestyle, how they kill each other like animal. In contrast, in looking the type of life that Africans or black people lived in Africa, it is way opposite. Because black people, Africans, were they had values. The virtues of living collectively like a community kept them. But when you look at the Vikings on the highlands, how they lived, it was all about war and conquest. It was all about that barbaric culture, right? And so trying to find this comparison makes me understand the true history. Because Africans, that's where life started in Africa. That's where the cradle of mankind is. And when we talk about the Moors, we talk about the group of black people who came from Africans, not as a result of slave trade, and went ahead, they had the sailing technology, they went ahead and taught all those people how to bathe, how to live, right? And now when things change, they say that they own everything. Those who are said to be without history birthed civilization itself. I want us to watch this video. It's from a channel called Without History. Kindly support the channel. They're doing a great work. I decided to do a commentary in regards to this because there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unlearn while watching these videos. Until then, I want us to watch this video. I'll be back and then I'll be giving my thoughts at the end of the video. As you usually know, feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section.
Like many, you haven't heard of this civilization before, not because it didn't exist, not because we don't have evidence of how large and how powerful it was. It is only spoken about sometimes as Atlantis, and other times as a mythical place to make sure that any serious studies about it are dismissed. No, you haven't heard about this civilization because historians will not speak openly about them, and historians will not mention them because of their identity. Because once you realize who they were, it will change your perspective on history once and for all. As archaeologists unearth evidence across the globe, it becomes increasingly clear that the ancient civilization originating from black Africans not only initiated civilization around 10,000 BC, but also extended it across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The examination of megalithic structures worldwide reveals striking resemblances, contributing to the evidence of a highly sophisticated ancient society. This evidence suggests the existence of a civilization advanced enough to map the Earth with remarkable accuracy, master stone construction, and make significant astronomical discoveries, including the planets in our solar system, their movements, and even calculate the precession movement of the stars. This civilization's legacy is evident through countless clues left behind, illustrating their profound impact on the world. Their influence was widespread and long-lasting, so much so that the Greeks and the Egyptians described them as Atlantean, and they came to be venerated as gods everywhere they brought their technology and way of life. But beyond the myth and the labels, these were the people to whom we owe the restart of civilization after the great catastrophe of the Younger Dryas. And today, whether we admit it or not, the evidence on their identity is definitive. They left clues in the form of monuments, writing, statues, drawings, linguistic origin, ancient maps, and above all, genetics, all pointing to the same people, black Africans. All of these pieces of evidence we will cover in this video, and by doing so, rediscover our grandiose ancient history and see how it influenced the whole globe. Before we get into the evidence of who these ancients were, let's first get a sense of how sophisticated their civilization was. If you have ever heard of the Piri Reis map and the Orontes Phineas maps, then you know that they both depict a coastline of South America before the full discovery of the continent by the Europeans. What's more intriguing is that they both depict the continent of Antarctica before the ice had been covered. And guess when was the last time the continent was ice-free? 6,000 years ago. So right in the middle of the Holocene, about 6,000 years ago, there was a sudden increase in global temperature that was also observed in a very sudden retreat of the southern ice cap. And you can see that in this 2021 paper by Dominic Winsky from the University of Maine. More research is emerging on that period of rapid ice sheet retreat. But for me, it isn't the presence of Antarctica that is the most surprising, but it is the fact that these maps show an excellent system of latitude and longitude. These medieval maps are all said to reference the Ptolemaic maps. If you take a look at this map, you can see it, and it is in fact a better proportional representation of the Earth. Notice how the longitudinal lines diverge. Well, this is how it is supposed to be because the Earth is round. So that means whoever made this map knew that the Earth was round, but also devised an accurate system of pinpointing the location of anything on the globe. A system, I might add, that we still use today. When you look at our maps today, our latitude and longitude system is biased because it heavily distorts the countries in the northern hemisphere to the disfavor of the countries at the equator. This is why the distance from Moscow to Beijing looks about twice the size of the distance from Mauritania to Ethiopia. And yet, in reality, they are exactly the same. So did the Greek invent this mapping system? Clearly not. They took it from the Africans when they settled in Egypt. So someone had the technology to navigate the globe during the Holocene, mapped it out with precision, and left us records of it. And to know who they were, we need to go back to the beginning of civilization. Because of the large amount of evidence we have to present, we will break down the video in 3 major parts. First, we'll deal with the scientific search and evidence showing the ethnicity of the originator as black Africans. Starting in 10,000 BC with the Natufians and the inventors of agriculture and the builders of Göbekli Tepe and the great lost civilization of the ancient Sahara. To the Nubia-Kemetic civilization that we call today ancient Egypt, to the Sumerians, culture holders who spread these know-hows. Then, we will share the evidence that shows that these originators spread their knowledge all over the globe in multiple colonies and civilizations that we call classical civilizations. Here again, the hands of the Africans are clearly shown with all too similar techniques and cultural icons present in all sorts of civilizations in the Bronze Age, including the early Greek, the Etruscans, the originators of the Roman civilization, the Chinese civilization, and the Olmecs, the Mother High culture in Mesoamerica. Lastly, we will see how long this civilization lasted, and how their descendants after the Bronze Age spawned yet more civilizations throughout ancient times. From the Olmecs, the Chinese, the civilizations in the Pacific, the Garamantes, to the Carthaginians, to Benin, the Ghana Empire. Major thanks to Camgiverse for his invaluable research contribution. His channel is a must for all Afro-descendants. As in all of our videos, we cite our sources and provide additional source material in the video description. It all started with the oldest builders, a people who for the longest time we thought were primitive, and we are now discovering that they were anything but. Now, whether or not there was a great civilization before or during the Ice Age that got wiped out at the end of the Younger Dryas, that I will leave for another video. But what we do know is that in 10,000 BC, humans faced a critical time in their history. Already conditions during the last Ice Age were extremely precarious for humans. Cold weather affected all of Europe and much of the African continent. The Younger Dryas itself caused another sudden fall of temperatures around 13,000 BC, with an even more rapid rise in temperatures 11,500 years ago. This sudden rise in temperature is associated with 2 major events: the rapid and brutal rise in sea levels, a rise so consequential that it changed the coastline of our planet for good. So any human settlements that would have taken refuge next to the coastlines to get a little bit of warmth would have been wiped out. The second major event that occurred was the sudden loss of most large land animals at the time. This period is also associated with sudden cataclysmic levels of inundations and floods. But as devastating as these floods were, they brought in one element that would benefit the humans that survived. A significant amount of silt from the melting of the ice from the last Ice Age and the Younger Dryas, along with the rapid flash flood and current changes, created a very fertile soil in the region of the Near East, the Fertile Crescent, and it is this soil, along with a now very favorable climate for humans, coupled with a lack of large predators in abundance that set the conditions for humans to discover agriculture. And as soon as humans started to domesticate plants and animals, there was no stopping them. The population size of humans exploded overnight, but their sophistication increased too. A myriad of tools, never seen before in the archaeological record, suddenly appear with the invention of agriculture. Sickle and flint blades, stone mortar and pestles, containers to ferment grain for beer. And this is what researchers from the University of Michigan confirmed in the 2005 paper, where they showed that Natufians had clear sub-Saharan African linkage. And I quote, "It is a further surprise that the Epipaleolithic Natufian of Israel, from whom the Neolithic realm was assumed to arise, has a clear link to sub-Saharan Africa." End quote. They also go on to reveal one of the most telling facts about the Natufian language, and it is that in their linguistic proximity analysis, Natufian more closely resembles the Niger-Congo language family, and this is in line with multiple other data points that clearly show that the Natufians were an advanced Black African culture. There are plenty of scholarly articles that validate this fact. I won't cite them all. But here is one interesting publication from the New York Times nonetheless, where the Natufians are described as a Negroid people by Sir Arthur, with wide faces, flat noses, and long, large heads. Skeletal remains of those practicing the Natufian culture date from the transition from the Neolithic to the Paleolithic. The Natufians were of medium stature. Their skulls were also dolichocephalic, with broad, short faces and a tendency towards prognathism. This was clarified in the book Paleopathology and the Origins of Agriculture by Mark Nathan Cohen and George G. Amalagas. Both dolichocephaly and prognathism are key traits of African populations. Dr. Iosef Lizaridis and Dr. Nathan Rowland from Harvard performed extensive genetic tests on Natufian archaeological remains, and this is what they found. Natufians had clear African DNA markers without any Neanderthal admixture, and where before the Natufians had been denied the building of Göbekli Tepe because it was thought as too advanced, Dr. Gil Hackley and Dr. Avi Gopher in their 2015 paper have clearly shown that Natufians were building temples with superb architectural planning and that they were the only people with enough specialization to do so. But he is not alone. Researcher Dr. Dorothy Garrett attests that the Natufians who were living in the Middle East since 13,000 BC would have been behind the construction of Göbekli Tepe, soon after the Holocene period began. So our Natufians, who speak a Niger-Congo language and have Black African phenotype and genes, created the first known megalithic superstructure in history, one that has themes and relics that appear in multiple other subsequent civilizations. And if Göbekli Tepe is any indication, the Natufians were very sophisticated. In Göbekli Tepe, they show that they had knowledge of so many sciences, mathematics, architecture, astronomy, just to name a few. In fact, all this information adds up because we already know that Africans were performing advanced mathematics 25,000 years ago with the Ashango bone. The bone shows mastery of prime numbers, multiplications, division, and even relationships between prime numbers, relationships that we just rediscovered and understood recently. And guess where the Ashango bone was found? You guessed it, in the Niger-Congo area, which matches the language spoken by the Natufians. They were also performing burial practices similar to the ones found in ancient Egypt. They were so sophisticated that they performed a very early version of mummification for their dogs that they buried with them in their tombs. If anything, research is now showing that the Natufians, that we originally considered as primitive early agriculturalists, were in fact a very sophisticated civilization that would spread architecture, culture, and science to its next-door neighbor as its people migrated to Egypt, Sumer, and as we will see in the next section, to the still green and lush Sahara. Armed now with agriculture, mathematics, and a stone-building culture, the Natufians influenced the whole globe, starting with Egypt. And we see the continuity of the Neolithic culture in very early Egyptian history. In 8000 BC, the inhabitants of ancient Egypt, Kemet, built one of the most astonishing celestial observatories called Nabta Playa. This monument shares many characteristics with Göbekli Tepe. They are both made of stones and both are aligned to the stars. But Nabta Playa alone shows that the Africans already had a very high level of sophistication, specialization, and enterprise well before the Sumerian civilization even started. Then a few millennia later, they would go on to invent writing, arguably one of the most consequential inventions in human history. And in his research, Dr. Gunther Dreyer of the German Archaeological Institute clearly demonstrates that the Africans from Kemet were the first to use writing before the Sumerians inherited the concept. But they would also create some of the most enduring monuments in ancient times, all of them built out of stone. And aside from the pyramids and the Sphinx, one of the most enigmatic and complex structures ever built is the Osirian, which is found below the temple of Seti I. This temple has dimensions and properties that are simply, well, there is no other term to describe it. Its dimensions and properties are Atlantean. This is an underground complex with a 15-meter moat and a hollow center island. Truly deserves to be opened to be studied more. Take a look at this 3D reconstruction of its architecture. Notice also how massive each of the stone pillars are. There are countless genetic and archaeological studies that have shown that the people from the Nubio-Kemetic civilization complex were black African. We will just name a few. In her research paper, Dr. Katrin Bard attests to the origin of complex society in Kemet from the south. In fact, Dr. David Okenor goes further and complements that argument with his own research on prehistoric Kemet between 5000 and 3000 BC, was not very different in its nature from that of contemporary African cultures. It is also ironic that one of Dr. Okenor's students was none other than Zahi Hawass. History, it seems, likes comedy. Add to this the studies that show that pre-dynastic Egyptians had L0F genetic markers showing they originated from Central Africa. And the numerous genetic studies show that the most predominant haplogroup in ancient Egypt is the E1B1A, also called M2, which is most prevalent in black Africans from West and Central Africa. This is in line with the multitude of ancient Egyptians' artifacts and contemporary pharaoh statues showing them as unmistakably black African. And they would continue the megalithic culture that they had initiated in the Levant 4,000 years before, and would perfect it to such a scale that it took until the end of the 19th century for a man-made structure to rival it in height. The ancient Egyptians' myth that the Greeks relate to us as the story of Atlantis tells us that there was a grandiose civilization that got wiped out 12,000 years ago, and that they migrated to ancient Egypt to restart their civilization. The interesting thing is that as much as this story is considered a myth, there are too many elements that coincide with verifiable archaeological research. The date coincides with the meltwater pulse 1b, when we had sudden major warming that caused water-related damage throughout the world. Researchers are now showing that this flood event was so violent that it would have hit civilization with such force that little to no trace would have survived. The genetics also match. There is black African genetic continuity between people of the ancient Sahara and that of Kemetu. Cam Jeevers has shown this in multiple research reviews. Here is one of the hundreds of studies that shows that Central Africans migrated 9,000 years ago to the ancient Sahara and then migrated to Egypt. The location matches. The description matches, including how the port of Atlantis opened up to the southern seaport and the 3 rings of land. What's even more telling is that salt deposits can be found in the Rishat structure. Other similarities, such as the presence of black and red stones, both found near the eye. The presences of elephants, which has been confirmed to exist when the Sahara was green 12 to 6,000 years ago. In ancient Sahara there are depictions of tropical animals including elephants. We will do a separate episode on the possibility of Atlantis being in the Sahara. For now, even if the land described as Atlantis was not in North Africa, we have enough evidence to show that 1. Ancient Sahara was green, 2. Ancient Sahara was a large civilization with its own writing, agriculture, and sophisticated stone building, and 3. It was populated by black Africans, the same ones that migrated to ancient Egypt when the Sahara dried up. So before the Kemetu, that we call the ancient Egyptians before them, While the Sahara was still green, there was a large and grandiose civilization that existed throughout the Sahara. To get a sense of how big this African civilization was, we have to realize that the distance between Moscow in Europe and Beijing, China, are identical. 5,800 kilometers or 3,600 miles. Yes, this will not translate on the map because maps have been distorted to represent Africa as much smaller than it is, but it means that this civilization that existed there was one of the largest in human history, and they were very complex. Multiple splendid but little-known megalithic ruins have been found in the Sahara Desert. Researcher Babacar Sall states that, quote, ancient Sahara, the one before the desert, reaffirms its ethnic and cultural origins as Black African. End quote. The people of ancient Sahara were already practicing mummification 1,000 years before the Egyptians. The mummy of the Black African child called Uan Mahujaj confirms this. Their religious practices were also found in Kemet. In the ancient Sahara, we also find the oldest writing system ever recorded. Proto-Saharan script and Insabidi, both of them at least 1,000 years older than hieroglyphics. And in fact, some researchers are suggesting that these writing systems may have been the root for Medu Necher, also called hieroglyphics. But more research is needed to confirm this. For now, it suffices to know that ancient Sahara was one of the largest and most sophisticated civilizations ever. Research also shows that the people from the Natufian culture migrated to North and Northeast Africa, where they kick-started the ancient Sahara and subsequently ancient Egypt. Their descendants also started the Sumerian civilization. Renowned as the authors of the Epic of Gilgamesh, builders of ziggurats, accomplished mathematicians, astronomers, and credited with the invention of the wheel and our method of timekeeping, their influence reverberates through the ages. For centuries it was widely assumed that the ancient Sumerians bore a resemblance to the modern inhabitants of their region. However, the evidence shows that the Mesopotamia civilization was in fact a continuation of the Natufian culture, both in terms of its ethnic identity and its cultural inheritance. Contrary to popular belief, particularly the early Sumerians who laid the very foundations of their civilization, from script and religion to technological innovations such as the wheel, were in fact of Black African descent. This is perfectly illustrated in the victory stele of Naram Sin, where both Naram Sin himself and the people of Zagreb that he defeated are phenotypically black with full complement of afros, luscious lips, and long limbs. This knowledge has been within scholarly circles for 2 centuries, yet it has not been widely disseminated. Cranial analysis of remains found throughout early Mesopotamia all the way to 1000 BC are predominantly black. In 2009, researchers from the Department of Anthropology of the University of Florida made a startling discovery. The paper attests that the Semitic language, in fact, has its roots in all the African languages. And I quote, "These results indicate that the ancestor of all Semitic languages in our dataset was being spoken in the Near East no earlier than approximately 7,400 YBP, after having diverged from Afroasiatic in Africa." End quote. Here is a chart that depicts the evolution of Semitic languages, and notice their origin. So in short, well into the Bronze Age, Afroasiatic originated in Africa and fanned out towards the Levant, before further branching out into the various Semitic languages that we know. The true identity and origins of the Sumerians were elucidated by Albert Terrien de la Couperie, a distinguished linguist and China expert. He asserted that the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Assyrians, who referred to themselves as Salmat Kakadi, or black-headed people, were all of Black Kushite lineage. Despite this historical verity, depictions of Sumerians in popular culture predominantly portray them as Semitic or Caucasian, neglecting their African heritage. The misrepresentation of Sumerians as Europeans is perpetuated by showcasing artifacts from the Guqian rule of Lagash as indicative of the true progenitors of Sumerian civilization, despite no recognition of Guqian rulers in the Sumerian king list. In the words of the eminent 19th-century American anthropologist John D. Baldwin, it is now admitted that a people of the Kushite or Ethiopian race were the first civilizers and builders throughout Western Asia. These profound insights compel us to reevaluate our understanding of ancient civilizations and acknowledge the pivotal contributions of Black African populations to human history. So from the Niger-Congo basin to the Natufians to ancient Sahara to the Nubio-Kemetic.
For the longest time, we have been lied to. We have always been told lies. And it is so much great that we need to have unlearning. We need to unlearn some things that we were taught, some things that we were taught that we didn't achieve, yet in real sense, we achieved. And for the longest time, I think the enemy knew very well the things that we are capable, the things that we were endowed with, the natural resources, and everything that we owned as Black people. Black people are the kings and queens. Black people are the owners. The earliest invention, the civilizations, they all stole from Black people. While some people might counter this argument, but it is true. Look at the Egypt, where the moose came from. That shows you that civilization itself began in Egypt, and Egypt is in the Middle East, while it is in Africa. Right? For centuries, Black people, particularly Africans, have been told that they have no history, no culture, no significant contribution to human civilization. This false narrative has been systemically pushed through colonial education, Western media, and biased history accounts. However, the truth is undeniable. Black people are very foundation upon which civilization was built. From ancient Nile Valley civilization to early mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and philosophy, Africa's role in shaping the world is deeply rooted in historical fact. The idea that Black people have no history is one of the greatest and most damaging lies ever told. And I understand the intensity. Because a lot of Black folks, especially in the United States, they usually told that you got no culture. How come you got no culture when, in fact, you're the ones who came up with civilization? Talking about the Moors, who taught all these folks how to bathe, who taught all these folks how to prepare food, who taught all these folks how to use the sailing technology. Remember when the colonizers were coming in the coastal part of Africa, while they were using the sailing technology, they borrowed the idea from the Moors, from Black people, from early Africans who left Africa and went to the United States. This group of people did not were not enslaved. This group of people, they had the brain and they moved. They used the sailing technology that they had to go to the United States. And they're the first people in those places. Because when Mr. Columbus was getting into the United States, they already got even Black people inside there. When they were going to Africa, they got Black people inside there. Right? And so this is a lie that most of us were told, and we were told to believe this. While it's important to learn that there is so much unlearning, there is so much decolonization that me as a continental African, I need to do. And I think I'm on my stages of decolonizing myself from a lot of things I was told. It's like a system reboot. Everything that I sat down learning in an history class, I need to unlearn them. Tell me why our white person invented a lake in Africa. Tell me why our white person invented a mountain in Africa. How even they naming these places? They should be naming it in the name of Africans or in the name of Black people who are there, who are also in those places. So that shows you how they've always strived to whitewash, to take credits for the things that they did not do. We need to know that Africa is the cradle of humanity and civilization. The first and most fundamental evidence of Africans' foundational role in civilization from the origins of humanity itself. Scientific research confirms that Africa is the birthplace of human species. There are fossil evidences that, supports this, such as the Australopithecus afarensis, famously known as Lucy, found in Ethiopia, and Homo sapiens remains discovered in Morocco, proves that human life began in Africa. Additionally, The DNA analysis has shown that all modern humans can trace their ancestry back to Africa. This means that the earliest societies, cultures, and civilizations were undeniably black. I'm a proud black man. To claim that black have no history is to ignore the very origin of human existence. Let's call a spade, not a big spoon, and that's what we're trying to do. Most of us will have to come and unlearn a lot of things that we were taught in our schools, because now we are getting the real education. Now we are getting the real history. These people lie. They lie about everything. They lie about every damn thing. Now, not only in Africa is the birthplace of humanity, but it is also the site of the earliest known technological and cultural advancements. The discovery of early stones in Kenya, dated back 3.3 million years ago, suggests that Africa were developing technology long before any other region to the world. The earliest evidence of organized human settlements, agriculture, and trade can also be found in Africa, proving that it was the center of human progress from the very beginning. Now let's talk about the big thing. The ancient Egypt, probably known as the Kemet, and the foundations of the civilization. One of the most important civilization in history is ancient Egypt. Some people call it the Kemet. Was undeniably an African civilization. The architectural genius behind the pyramids, the advancements in medicine, and the earliest forms of writing, known as hieroglyphics, all emerged from Black African society. This is contrary to the Eurocentric historical distortions. The people of Kemet were not Middle Eastern or Caucasian. They were African. Scholars such as Sheikh Anta Diop have provided extensive research, including melanin testing and ancient mummies, to prove that the original Egyptians were black. The deliberate whitewashing of Egyptian history is part of the broader attempt to erase Africa's contribution to human civilization. It's true. They tried to deliberately whitewash these. And they'll argue, they'll tell you that no, civilization didn't start from Egypt. It didn't. But this shows you, right? People like Ivan Satima talked about this. They talked about the ancient civilizations, black ancient civilization, ancient Egypt, the Kemet. They taught this, right? And this is true. And I know that this has to be taught to a lot of people to change their perspective of what they think about black people, what they think about Africans. And this is so much. And I feel like there's so much that needs to be learned. There's so much needs to be unlearned at the same time. Now, the Egyptians created one of the world's first writing systems, the Medu Neter. You probably know it as hieroglyphics, but it is known as the Medu Neter, which influenced later alphabets including Greek and Latin scripts. Their knowledge of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy allowed them to build the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so advanced that modern engineers still struggle to understand its construction methods. Egyptian medical practices recorded in texts such as the Edwin Smith Papyrus demonstrate knowledge of surgery, anatomy, and pharmacology that would not be matched in Europe until thousands of years later. Now, let's go and look something beyond Egypt. Other great African civilization. While Egypt is often most cited African civilization, it was far from only one. Other great African empires and kingdoms flourished long before Europe and from the Dark Ages. First, let's talk about the Kingdom of Kush, located in present-day Sudan. ruled over Egypt at one point, proving that African civilization not only advanced but also powerful enough, right? But also powerful enough to influence each other. The Kushites built their own pyramids, developed unique forms of writing, art and writing, and engaged in international trade with other parts of Africa and Mediterranean world. This shows you the extent that we were way ahead of all these folks. Let's talk about the Mali Empire. You know very well that Mali Empire was led by Honorable himself, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was one of the richest and most prosperous empires in history. Mansa Musa he was considered one of the wealthiest person of all time, controlled vast gold mines that supplied most of the world's gold. Timbuktu, a city in Mali, became a center of leading trading and culture, with its great universities attracting scholars from across Africa and the Middle East. Imagine, we are talking about universities at that point. What does that show you? Let's talk about the Great Zimbabwean Civilization. The Great Zimbabwean Civilization was a center of trade and architecture, with massive stone structures that rivaled European castles in complexity and durability. You know very well the Kingdom of Axum, the present-day Ethiopia, was one of the major civilizations to adopt Christianity long before much Europe. The Axum advanced trade networks connected to Africa to the Middle East and Asia, proving Africa's role in commerce. Even in commerce, we still trace it back to Africa. The Alkebulan. Let's look at Africa's contribution in mathematics and science. Mathematics and science, two pillars of modern civilization, also have a deep African origin. The Ishango bone found in the Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the oldest known mathematical artifacts, providing that Africa were developing numerical system tens of thousands of years ago. Ancient Egyptians used advanced mathematics in constructing pyramids and developing early forms of algebra and geometry long before the Greeks. Additionally, the African stone calendar of Nabta Playa, discovered in Egypt, is older than Stone Age and demonstrates that Africans were studying astronomy and mapping the stars thousands of years before Europeans. The Dogon people of Mali possessed advanced technology, possessed knowledge of the Sirius star system, knowledge that Western astronomers only confirmed with modern telescopes. That shows you the level of technology and science that we had. These facts prove that Africa was a leader of science and intellectual throughout long before Europe's so-called Age of Enlightenment. So I think it's important for us to give credit and, talk about all this, the truth that matters, the truth that we should be talking about. Also, I'm going to be talking about Africa's influence on world religion and philosophy. The influence of Africa on world civilization extends beyond science and architecture into spirituality and philosophy. Many of the religious and philosophical systems that shape the world have roots in Africa. Ancient Egyptian spiritual beliefs, including the concept of Ma'at, the balance between truth and justice, influenced later religions such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islamism. Christianity, often thought as European religion, has deep African roots. The early Christian church was heavily influenced by African theologians such as Saint Augustine, Tertullian, and Origen. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the oldest Christian institutions in the world. despite African origins of major religious movements, reinforcing the idea that Africa contributed little to global spiritual thought, while in return, it is true that African contributed 90% of all this. So they have always tried to delete black innovation, but black people are still standing despite all those challenges that are happening, despite all those things that are happening. And I think it's important for us to know the importance of reclaiming black history. It is that time that we need to sit down and think of how we can reclaim that history back, because what was taken, we have to reclaim it back. And if we were the blueprint of the past, that also tells you that we still are the blueprint of the future. I don't know what you think while watching the video, but most importantly, I hope the insights that I shared are really, really important. But until then, I'm hoping to see you on my next video. Until then, peace, love, and harmony. I'm going to be sharing the documents that I used while using the presentation in the description, so that you can also go check for yourself. You can also go do your study. You can also go do your research, because research is key to anything you want to find. Any study you want to do, research forms the basis of everything. For you to find the truth, you need to do research. For you to have empiricism, you need to do research. Whether in the laboratory, whether in the field, research is key. Research is important, right? So if you're watching this video for the first time, I'll most definitely ask you to subscribe to our channel, join our membership, and really get to see what we can offer you. But until then, peace, love, and harmony. Salute.